The morning sun cast long shadows across the military briefing room as Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire delivered the declaration that would shake the galaxy. His scaled fingers drummed against the polished table as he spoke to the assembled War Council, each member representing one of the 12 species that had sworn allegiance to the Empire. "The humans have refused our final ultimatum," Admiral Kethvar announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "They will not surrender their outer colonies, they will not submit to imperial taxation, and they will not acknowledge our sovereignty over their trade routes. Therefore, as of this moment, the Zephyrian Empire formally declares war on the Human Confederation." The reaction was swift and predictable. General Thaxheim of the Brutari war clans slammed his massive fist on the table with enthusiasm, while the insectoid hive speaker clicked approval through her mandibles. The more cautious members, like the crystalline Veltar representative, simply pulsed with nervous energy. "Admiral," spoke Commander Zilneth of the Aquatic Merdan fleet, "our intelligence suggests the humans possess only a fraction of our military strength. Their technology is primitive compared to ours, and their numbers are insignificant. This war should conclude within solar cycles." Admiral Kethvar nodded slowly. The Empire had faced dozens of species before, each one eventually bowing to their superior firepower and tactical prowess. The humans appeared no different from the rest, a young species that had barely begun to explore beyond their home system when the Empire first encountered them 50 years ago. "The humans control approximately 47 star systems," the Admiral continued, activating a holographic display that showed the known galaxy. Red dots marked Imperial territory, stretching across thousands of systems, while a small cluster of blue dots represented human space. "Our preliminary assault will focus on their outer colonies first, forcing them to spread their limited defensive forces thin." Meanwhile, billions of light years away on the frontier world of New Aberdeen, an old man sat on his porch watching the twin suns set over the wheat fields. Marcus Chun had been many things in his 78 years: a farmer's son, a soldier, a veteran of 3 different conflicts, and now a simple colonist trying to enjoy his retirement. His weathered hands held a cup of synthetic coffee as he listened to the evening news broadcast. Breaking news from Earth Central Command. The reporter's voice crackled through his old radio. "The Zephyrian Empire has officially declared war on the Human Confederation. All civilian populations in Outer Rim territories are advised to prepare for possible evacuation orders." Marcus took another sip of his coffee and chuckled softly. The sound carried across the quiet farmyard, where his automated harvesters continued their evening routine. He had heard declarations of war before, had lived through the chaos they brought, and had seen what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. His neighbor, Sarah Williams, came rushing over from the adjacent farm, her face pale with worry. "Marcus, did you hear? They say the Empire has over 10,000 warships. The news is saying we might need to evacuate." Marcus stood slowly, his old joints creaking in protest. At 6 feet tall, he still carried himself with the bearing of the soldier he had once been, though his hair was now silver and his face lined with decades of hard living. He looked at Sarah with calm, steady eyes that had seen too much to be easily frightened. "I heard," he said simply. "What are we going to do? The Empire conquered the Altarian Republic in less than 6 months. They have technology we've never seen, weapons that can crack planets." Sarah's voice rose with each word, panic creeping in. Marcus set down his coffee cup and walked to the edge of his porch. In the distance, he could see the lights of other farms, other families probably having similar conversations. These were good people, farmers, mechanics, teachers, shop owners, who had come to the frontier seeking peace and a chance to build something new. They didn't deserve to live in fear. "Sarah," Marcus said quietly, "how long have you known me?" "About 15 years, ever since I moved here." "Why? In all that time, have I ever told you what I did before I became a farmer?" Sarah paused, realizing that despite their long friendship, Marcus had always been remarkably private about his past. "You said you were in the military, but you never talked about it much." Marcus nodded and walked back to his chair. "I was in the Colonial Defense Force for 37 years. Started as a private when I was 17, worked my way up to colonel before I retired. I fought in the Proxima Rebellion, the Titan Mining Wars, and the Independence campaigns. I had no idea you were so highly ranked, Sarah said, her voice filled with new respect. Rank doesn't matter much out here, Marcus replied. What matters is that I've seen humans fight when their backs are against the wall. I've seen what we're capable of when someone threatens our families, our homes, our freedom. Sarah sat down on the porch steps, her earlier panic beginning to fade as she listened to the old soldier's calm voice. But, Marcus, the Empire is so much bigger than us. They have thousands of species, unlimited resources, advanced technology. How can we possibly stand against them? Marcus looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, enemy fleets were probably already moving, planning to sweep through human space like a tide of destruction. The thought should have terrified him, but instead, he felt something else, a familiar feeling from his younger days. You know what the Empire's biggest mistake is, Sarah? Marcus asked. What? They think this is going to be easy. They think humans are just another species to be conquered, just another collection of worlds to be added to their territory. They've been crushing civilizations for centuries, and they've developed a pattern. Show up with overwhelming force, demand surrender, and when the enemy refuses, obliterate their resistance with superior technology. Marcus stood up again and looked directly at his neighbor. But they don't understand humans. They don't know our history, our culture, our stubborn refusal to quit when things get tough. They see our small fleet and assume we're weak. They see our scattered colonies and think we're vulnerable. Aren't we? Sarah asked quietly. Marcus smiled then, and Sarah caught a glimpse of the young soldier he had once been. Sarah, let me tell you something about humans. We spent thousands of years fighting each other on Earth. Wars over territory, resources, ideology, religion. We developed weapons that could destroy our entire planet, and we came close to using them more than once. We survived ice ages, plagues, asteroid impacts, and our own stupidity. He paused, letting his words sink in. When we finally reached the stars, we didn't stop fighting. We just found new things to fight over, new challenges to overcome. Every colony ship that left Earth was filled with people who were willing to risk everything for a chance at something better. Every world we've settled has been carved out of hostile environments through pure human determination. The radio crackled with more news updates, reports of Imperial fleet movements, emergency meetings of the Confederation Council, civilian evacuations beginning on the closest border worlds. Marcus listened for a moment, then turned off the radio. The Empire is about to learn something that every other species we've faced has learned, he said quietly. You can beat humans in a battle. You can destroy our ships, conquer our worlds, kill millions of us. But you cannot break the human spirit. You cannot make us surrender when our survival is at stake. Sarah felt some of her fear melting away, replaced by something stronger. What do you think will happen? Marcus picked up his coffee cup and drained the last drops. The Empire will attack our outer colonies first, just like they always do. They'll expect quick victories, mass surrenders, panic in the streets. Instead, they're going to find humans who refuse to run, who fight for every meter of ground, who make the Empire pay in blood for every small victory. And then they'll realize they're not fighting a conquest war anymore, Marcus said with quiet certainty. They're fighting a survival war. And humans are very, very good at survival wars. In the distance, the lights of New Aberdeen's small spaceport began to flicker to life as the colony prepared for whatever was coming. Marcus Chun, old soldier turned farmer, stood on his porch and looked up at the stars one more time. Somewhere up there, an empire was mobilizing for war, confident in their superiority and certain of their victory. They would learn soon enough that they had made a terrible miscalculation. The war was coming, and humanity was ready. The Imperial 7th Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system with the precision and overwhelming force that had become the Empire's signature. Admiral Vextar commanded the flotilla from his flagship, the massive dreadnought, Eternal Conquest, a vessel 3 kilometers long and bristling with enough firepower to reduce a planet to molten slag. Contact established with the human colony of Haven's Rest, reported his communications officer, a multi-eyed Kindari whose species had joined the Empire after their own swift defeat decades earlier. The colonists have been given standard surrender terms, immediate cessation of all resistance, submission to imperial authority, and preparation for relocation. Admiral Vextar studied the tactical display with satisfaction. Haven's Rest was a small agricultural world with a population of barely 50,000 humans. Intelligence reports suggested minimal defensive capabilities, perhaps a few outdated patrol vessels, and some basic planetary shields. It should be conquered within hours, providing the Empire with its first human territory and sending a clear message to the rest of the Confederation. "Sir," the sensor operator announced, "we're receiving a response from the planetary government." "Put on the main screen," Vextar ordered. The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the image of a middle-aged human woman sitting behind a simple wooden desk. She wore practical clothing rather than any kind of uniform, and her office appeared to be located in a civilian building rather than a military installation. Everything about her appearance suggested that Haven's Rest was exactly what the intelligence reports indicated: a peaceful farming colony with no significant defensive capabilities. "I'm Governor Elena Rodriguez of Haven's Rest," the woman said calmly. "We have received your surrender demands, and I am authorized to deliver our colony's official response." Admiral Vextar leaned forward slightly. This was the moment he enjoyed most, watching the hope drain from an enemy's face as they realized the futility of resistance against Imperial might. "Admiral Vextar of the Imperial 7th Fleet," he replied formally. "You have 1 hour to begin evacuation procedures, Governor Rodriguez. Any attempt at resistance will result in the complete destruction of your colony." Governor Rodriguez nodded slowly, as if considering her options. "Admiral, before I give you our answer, I'd like to share something with you. My grandfather was a man named Miguel Rodriguez. He fought in something called the Battle of Stalingrad during one of our old wars on Earth. Do you know what he told me about fighting when you're outnumbered and outgunned?" Admiral Vextar's scaled brow furrowed in confusion. "I fail to see the relevance of ancient human conflicts to your current situation. He told me," Governor Rodriguez continued, "that the size of your enemy's army doesn't matter as much as the size of their mistakes. And, Admiral, you've made a very big mistake." Before Vextar could respond, his tactical officer's voice cut through the bridge with sharp urgency. "Sir, multiple energy signatures detected throughout the system. They're coming from everywhere." The tactical display exploded with new contacts. What had appeared to be empty space around Haven's Rest was suddenly filled with human vessels emerging from what must have been incredibly sophisticated stealth fields. Not the handful of patrol boats Imperial intelligence had expected, but dozens of warships, destroyers, cruisers, and at least 3 massive vessels that the sensors classified as battleships. "Impossible, Admiral Vextar Briated." Our intelligence indicated minimal defensive forces. On the communication channel, Governor Rodriguez smiled. "Admiral, let me introduce you to the Haven's Rest Home Guard. Most of these ships belong to retired members of the Confederation Navy who decided that farming wasn't quite exciting enough for their golden years. The gentleman commanding our flagship used to be an admiral himself." As if summoned by her words, another human face appeared on the screen, an elderly man with steel-gray hair and eyes that held the weight of decades of command experience. "Admiral Vextar," the old human said with polite formality. "I am Admiral Marcus Thompson, formerly of the Confederation Navy, currently commanding the civilian defense fleet of Haven's Rest. I retired to this system 5 years ago to grow tomatoes and raise chickens. Frankly, I was getting bored with civilian life." Admiral Vextar's mind raced as he tried to process what was happening. Intelligence had been completely wrong. This wasn't a defenseless farming colony. It was a trap. "You cannot hope to match the firepower of an Imperial fleet," Vextar said, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Admiral Thompson chuckled. "You're absolutely right. Your ships are newer, your weapons more advanced, your numbers superior. In a straight fight, you'd probably win, though not without significant losses. Fortunately for us, we're not interested in fighting fair." "Sir," the sensor officer called out again. "The human vessels are moving into attack formation, but they're not targeting our ships directly. They're positioning themselves around the asteroid belt and the outer planets." Admiral Thompson's smile widened. "Admiral Vextar, let me ask you something. In all your years of conquest, how many times have you fought in a system that the enemy knew better than you did? How many times have you faced opponents who had months or years to prepare for your arrival? The answer was never. The Empire's standard strategy relied on swift, overwhelming assaults against unprepared enemies. They arrived, demanded surrender, and, when it was refused, they applied superior firepower until resistance collapsed. They had never faced an enemy that had time to prepare, to study Imperial tactics, to turn their own knowledge of local conditions into a weapon. The thing about farming communities, Admiral Governor Rodriguez said, is that we know our land. Every asteroid in this belt has been mapped and mined by our people. Every gravitational anomaly, every solar wind pattern, every quirk of local space, we know it all. As if to demonstrate her point, the human defense fleets suddenly seemed to vanish again, their ships disappearing behind asteroids and into the sensor shadows created by the system's twin gas giants. "Sir, we're losing sensor contact with most of the human vessels," reported the tactical officer. "The asteroids are creating too much interference, and they seem to be using some kind of advanced stealth technology." Admiral Thompson's image remained clear on the communication channel. "We've had 50 years to study Imperial technology, Admiral Vextar. 50 years to learn from every species you've conquered, to understand your tactics, to prepare for this moment. Did you really think we were sitting out here growing crops and raising livestock?" The first human attack came without warning. Not the massive frontal assault that Imperial doctrine expected, but a series of precise strikes from unexpected angles. Human ships emerged from behind asteroids, fired salvos of missiles and energy weapons, then disappeared back into the maze of rocky debris before the Imperial fleet could respond effectively. "Damage reports coming in from multiple vessels," the communications officer announced. "The cruiser Domination has lost primary shields. The destroyer Swift Victory reports engine damage." Admiral Vextar realized with growing alarm that his overwhelming numerical advantage was being neutralized by the humans' superior knowledge of local conditions. Every time his ships tried to pursue the attackers, they found themselves navigating through dangerous asteroid fields while their enemies seemed to move through the same spaces with perfect confidence. "Admiral," his tactical officer said urgently, "the humans are using the asteroid belt like a defensive maze. They know safe passages that we don't, and they're leading our pursuit squadrons into dead-end sectors where they could be attacked from multiple directions." On the screen, Admiral Thompson was consulting with what appeared to be a group of elderly humans in civilian clothing, though their bearing and the efficiency of their movements suggested extensive military experience. "Admiral Vextar," Thompson said, turning back to the camera, "I'm going to share some information that might help you understand your situation. Every human colony in this sector of space has been preparing for this war for decades. We've been sharing intelligence, coordinating defenses, and learning from every encounter our species has had with yours." "Your point," Vextar demanded, though he was beginning to understand exactly what Thompson meant. "My point is that you're not fighting one isolated colony, Admiral. You're fighting a network of interconnected communities that have been planning for your arrival since before most of your crew was born. Every farmer on Haven's Rest is a retired soldier, sailor, or marine. Every mining operation in our asteroid belt doubles as a weapons platform. Every shipping route through this system is monitored by people who know how to fight." Another wave of attacks struck the Imperial fleet, this time coordinated across multiple vectors. Human ships that had been hiding in the sensor shadows of gas giant moons emerged to strike at the flanks of Imperial formations, while missile platforms that had been disguised as mining equipment activated throughout the asteroid belt. "Sir," the damage control officer reported, "we've lost 2 destroyers and a cruiser. The humans are targeting our engines and life support systems rather than trying to destroy us outright." Admiral Vextar realized the tactical brilliance of the human strategy. Rather than trying to match Imperial firepower directly, they were systematically crippling his fleet's ability to maneuver and pursue. Ships with damaged engines became sitting targets in the dangerous asteroid field, while vessels with compromised life support systems had to withdraw from combat to prevent crew casualties. "Admiral Thompson," Vextar said, his voice tight with frustration, "this is merely one system. Even if you defeat my fleet, the Empire will send larger forces. We have thousands of ships, millions of troops." "You're absolutely right," Thompson agreed cheerfully. "And Every one of those ships is going to face the same problem you're facing now. See, Admiral, the Empire has taught us something valuable over the years. You've shown us that when you're facing a stronger opponent, you don't try to outmuscle them. You make them fight on your terms, in your territory, using your rules. Another squadron of human ships emerged from concealment, this time carrying what appeared to be captured Imperial weapons technology that had been modified and improved. We've been studying your equipment for 50 years, Governor Rodriguez added. Every piece of Imperial technology that fell into human hands was reverse-engineered, improved, and shared across our colonies. Your own weapons are being used against you, Admiral, but in ways you never intended them to be used. Admiral Vextar watched his tactical display with growing horror as a seemingly overwhelming force was systematically dismantled by an enemy that refused to fight according to Imperial expectations. The humans weren't trying to win a glorious battle. They were fighting a war of attrition, using every advantage their local knowledge provided to maximize Imperial casualties while minimizing their own. "Retreat," he ordered quietly. "Sir," his communications officer asked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Sound General Retreat," Admiral Vextar said more loudly. "All ships are to withdraw from the system immediately." On the screen, Admiral Thompson nodded with something that might have been respect. "Admiral Vextar, you're welcome to try again anytime. We'll be here, and we'll be ready. But next time, you might want to bring more ships." As the remnants of the Imperial 7th Fleet limped away from Haven's Rest, Admiral Vextar realized that everything the Empire thought it knew about conquering the humans was wrong. This wasn't going to be a quick, easy victory. This was going to be a long, bloody war against an enemy that had been preparing for this moment their entire lives. The Empire had declared war on humanity, expecting swift victory. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The emergency session of the Imperial War Council convened in the massive crystal chamber at the heart of the Empire's capital world. Representatives from 12 species gathered around a circular table, their faces, mandibles, and various sensory organs displaying confusion, anger, and growing concern. The holographic reports floating above the table told a story that none of them had expected to hear. Admiral Kethvar stood at the center of the chamber, his scaled skin dark with frustration as he delivered the impossible news. "In the past 3 standard months, we have launched 7 separate invasion fleets against human territories. 7 fleets representing over 1,500 vessels and the combined military might of 4 different Imperial species." General Thaxheim of the Brutari leaned forward, his massive frame causing the reinforced chair to creak. "And the results? 5 fleets suffered significant casualties and were forced to retreat," Admiral Kethvar continued. "1 fleet was entirely destroyed when the humans collapsed the star system's asteroid belt onto their formation. The 7th fleet is still missing and presumed captured or destroyed." The silence that followed was deafening. The Empire had not lost a single battle in over 200 years. The idea that primitive humans could not only resist Imperial forces, but actively defeat them seemed impossible to accept. The Hive Speaker's mandibles clicked rapidly as she processed the information. "Explain how this is possible." "Our intelligence indicated humans possessed inferior technology and limited defensive capabilities." Admiral Kethvar activated a series of holographic displays that showed battle recordings from each failed invasion. "Our intelligence was catastrophically incorrect. The humans have been preparing for war with us for decades. Every colony we've encountered has been heavily fortified and defended by what appear to be retired military personnel with extensive combat experience." More concerning, added Intelligence Director Kelnith of the Crystalline Veltar, is the humans' apparent knowledge of our tactics, technology, and strategic doctrine. They have been studying us as intensively as we have been studying them, but with significantly better results. The recordings showed Imperial fleets being systematically outmaneuvered by human forces that seemed to anticipate every tactical decision. Human ships used modified Imperial technology alongside their own innovations, creating hybrid weapons systems that Imperial forces were unprepared to counter. Commander Zilneth of the Merdan fleet raised a webbed hand. "If the humans possess such capabilities, why did they not use them during our initial diplomatic contacts? Why allow us to believe they were weak?" because came a new voice from the chamber's entrance. They wanted us to underestimate them. Every head in the council chamber turned to see Supreme Admiral Drakmor enter the room. The elderly Zephyrian commander had led the Empire's military forces for over 50 years, conquering dozens of species and expanding Imperial territory across half the known galaxy. His presence at the emergency session indicated the seriousness of the human situation. Supreme Admiral Kethvar said with evident relief, "Your insight into this crisis would be valuable." Drakmor moved slowly to his position at the head of the council table, his ancient eyes studying the battle recordings with professional interest. "I have been reviewing all available intelligence on human military history, cultural patterns, and technological development. The conclusion is both simple and terrifying." "Explain," demanded General Thaxim. "We are not fighting the same kind of war we have always fought," Drakmor said quietly. "Every species the Empire has conquered followed predictable patterns. They built large, centralized fleets, defended their home worlds, and attempted to match our firepower with their own. When we proved superior, they surrendered to preserve their populations." The Supreme Admiral gestured to the holographic displays showing human battle tactics. "Humans do not follow these patterns. They have studied our methods and deliberately developed counter-strategies designed to neutralize our advantages. They do not seek to match our firepower. They seek to make our firepower irrelevant." "How?" the Hive Speaker asked. "By refusing to fight the war we want to fight," Drakmor replied. "Look at these recordings carefully. In every engagement, human forces avoid direct confrontation with our main battle groups. Instead, they use superior knowledge of local conditions to fragment our fleets, isolate individual vessels, and attack our logistics and support systems." Intelligence Director Kelnith pulsed with nervous energy. "Our analysis suggests that every human colony is effectively a fortress designed to inflict maximum casualties on any attacking force. They have been preparing defensive positions for decades." "Not just defensive positions," Drakmor corrected. "They have been preparing offensive capabilities that we did not anticipate. Human civilian infrastructure doubles as military infrastructure. Their mining operations produce weapons. Their agricultural colonies train soldiers. Their commercial shipping routes serve as intelligence networks." Admiral Kethvar studied the tactical analyses with growing alarm. "Supreme Admiral, you're suggesting that the human civilian population is actually a disguised military force." "I am suggesting," Drakmor said grimly, "that humans do not distinguish between civilians and military personnel the way we do. Every human colony we have encountered has been defended by individuals with extensive combat training and experience. Their farmers are former soldiers. Their miners are former Marines. Their teachers are former intelligence officers." General Thaxim slammed his fist on the table. "Then we crush them with overwhelming force. Deploy the first armada. 20,000 ships should be sufficient to break any human resistance." Supreme Admiral Drakmor turned his ancient gaze to the Brutari General. "General, how many ships does the Empire possess in total?" "Approximately 45,000 combat vessels across all fleets," Thaxim replied proudly. "And how many star systems do humans control?" 47 confirmed systems, though our recent intelligence suggests the number may be higher. "If we deploy 20,000 ships to crush human resistance," Drakmor said quietly, "and if the humans inflict casualty rates similar to what they have achieved in recent engagements, we could lose 5,000 to 8,000 vessels conquering their territory." The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. Losing 8,000 ships to conquer 47 systems would represent the largest military disaster in Imperial history. Commander Zilneth's aquatic voice bubbled with concern. "Surely human resistance will collapse once they suffer sufficient losses?" "Will it?" Drakmor asked. "I've been studying human historical records, particularly their conflicts with each other. Humans have a documented history of fighting wars of extermination against their own species. They have shown willingness to sacrifice entire populations rather than surrender to enemies they consider existential threats." The council chamber fell silent as the members contemplated what Drakmor was suggesting. "Supreme Admiral," the Hive Speaker clicked slowly, "are you indicating that humans will not surrender even when facing certain defeat?" I am indicating that humans may not consider any defeat certain, Drakmor replied. Their military history shows consistent patterns of continued resistance even when facing overwhelming odds. They have a cultural concept they call fighting to the last man that appears to be more than mere rhetoric. Intelligence Director Kelnith pulsed rapidly. Our cultural analysis suggests that humans view this war as a survival conflict rather than a territorial dispute. They appear to believe that surrender would result in the extinction of their species. Would it? Admiral Kethvar asked. The question hung in the air. Imperial policy toward conquered species was typically harsh but not genocidal. Defeated populations were relocated, re-educated, and integrated into the empire as subjugated citizens. But humans seemed to believe that submission would mean death. Perhaps, Supreme Admiral Drakmor said slowly, they understand something about the empire that we ourselves have forgotten. When was the last time a conquered species maintained its original culture, language, and political identity after integration into the empire? The answer was never. Every species that had been conquered by the empire had eventually been absorbed, their distinctive characteristics diluted or eliminated over time. From the human perspective, imperial conquest did represent a form of extinction. Not physical death, but cultural death. So they fight, General Thaxheim said grimly. They fight, Drakmor confirmed. And they fight with the desperation of beings who believe they have nothing to lose. That makes them exponentially more dangerous than any enemy we have faced before. Commander Zilneth asked the question that everyone was thinking. What do you recommend, Supreme Admiral? Drakmor studied the holographic displays for a long moment, analyzing the tactical reports from each failed invasion attempt. I recommend that we reconsider our strategic objectives. The conquest of human space may be possible, but it will require resources and casualties far beyond what we initially anticipated. You're suggesting we negotiate? Admiral Kethvar asked with surprise. I am suggesting, Drakmor said carefully, that we consider whether the conquest of human space is worth the price we will have to pay. The humans are not offering us valuable territory, advanced technology, or significant resources. They are offering us a grinding war of attrition against an enemy that has been preparing for this conflict their entire lives. The council members exchanged glances, each contemplating the unthinkable possibility that the Empire might actually lose a war. However, Drakmor continued, if the council decides that human conquest remains a strategic necessity, then we must change our approach entirely. We cannot defeat them using conventional imperial doctrine. We will need to develop new tactics, deploy new technologies, and accept that this will be unlike any war the Empire has ever fought. General Thaxheim's voice was grim. What kind of war? A war against an enemy that knows us as well as we know ourselves, Supreme Admiral Drakmor replied. A war against opponents who have turned preparation into an art form. A war against beings who would rather die fighting than live in chains. He paused, looking around the council chamber at the faces of the Empire's greatest military minds. A war that we may not win. Captain Elena Vasquez of the Confederation Navy ship, Indomitable, stood in the command center of the hidden military complex buried deep within the asteroid field of the Kepler 442 system. The facility, codenamed Forge Prime, had been under construction for 30 years, disguised as a simple mining operation while actually serving as the coordination center for humanity's longest and most ambitious military project. Captain, we're receiving real-time intelligence from our embedded assets throughout Imperial space, reported Lieutenant Commander James Park, the facility's intelligence chief. The Empire is mobilizing their 2nd, 4th, and 9th armadas for a coordinated assault on the Sol system. Captain Vasquez studied the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. The massive holographic projection showed the movement of Imperial fleets across 3 sectors, their formations and objectives becoming clear as human intelligence networks tracked every ship movement, every communication, every strategic decision. How many ships total? She asked. Approximately 18,000 vessels, Park replied. This represents the largest military force the Empire has ever assembled for a single campaign. They're clearly taking us seriously now. Good, Vasquez said quietly. It means Phase 1 was successful. The past 6 months of warfare had been carefully orchestrated to achieve exactly this response. Every human victory, every Imperial defeat, every demonstration of human military capability had been designed to convince the Empire that only overwhelming force could secure victory. The humans had deliberately baited the Empire into committing the majority of their fleet to a single massive assault. Admiral Sarah Chun, the legendary strategist who had designed humanity's war plan, appeared on the communication screen. At 75 years old, she commanded the respect of every human in uniform and had spent the last 20 years preparing for this exact moment. Captain Vasquez, Admiral Chin said, "Initiate Phase 2. All human fleets are to begin final approach to their assigned targets. Operation Prometheus is now active." "Understood, Admiral. All forces report ready." What the Empire didn't know, what their intelligence networks had failed to discover despite decades of surveillance, was that humanity's true military strength had been hidden not in obvious places like their home system, but in locations the Empire would never think to look. Human heavy industry had been quietly relocated to rogue planets in interstellar space, worlds that had been ejected from their star systems millions of years ago and now drifted invisibly through the galaxy. "Sir," reported the communications officer, "we're receiving confirmation signals from all Prometheus sites. 37 hidden shipyards report full operational status and maximum production output." Captain Vasquez nodded. For 3 decades, human civilization had been preparing for this war by building manufacturing facilities in places that didn't officially exist. Massive industrial complexes powered by fusion reactors and hidden in the depths of space, far from any star system that Imperial scouts might visit. Each facility had been producing warships, weapons, and supplies in absolute secrecy. "Begin the reveal," Vasquez ordered. Across human space, stealth fields that had hidden entire fleets for years began to deactivate. The Empire had calculated human naval strength based on visible shipyards and known construction facilities. They had no idea that humanity had built a second, secret navy 3 times larger than anything Imperial intelligence had detected. Lieutenant Commander Park's voice was filled with quiet satisfaction as he read the incoming reports. "Captain, our scouts report massive Imperial confusion as they detect the actual size of the Confederation Navy. Their initial fleet strength estimates are being revised upward by factors of 3 to 4. How are they responding?" "Panic mostly. They've discovered that we have over 2,000 capital ships, not the 600 they thought. Their strategic planning was based on completely incorrect intelligence. The beauty of Operation Prometheus was its simplicity. While the Empire had been watching human civilian populations and official military installations, they had missed the massive secret infrastructure that represented humanity's real war machine. Every civilian freighter that had left human space over the past 30 years had carried not just trade goods, but personnel, equipment, and supplies for the hidden shipyards. Admiral Chin's image reappeared on the communication screen. "Captain, Phase 3 is now active. Begin targeted strikes on Imperial logistics and supply lines." This was the part of the plan that Captain Vasquez had been looking forward to. While the Empire was mobilizing massive fleets for their assault on human space, those fleets were completely dependent on complex supply chains stretching across hundreds of light years. Supply depots, fuel stations, communication relays, repair facilities, all the unglamorous but essential infrastructure that allowed Imperial forces to operate far from their home territories. "All stealth squadrons report ready for interdiction operations," announced the tactical officer. Human forces had spent months infiltrating Imperial territory, not to gather intelligence, but to position small, fast-attack squadrons near critical supply nodes. While the Empire's main fleets were focused on human systems, their support infrastructure was about to come under coordinated assault from directions they never expected. "Execute," Captain Vasquez ordered. The attacks began simultaneously across 12 sectors. Human stealth ships emerged from hiding places throughout Imperial space to strike fuel convoys, destroy supply depots, and eliminate communication networks. Each strike was carefully calculated to maximize disruption while minimizing the risk of Imperial retaliation. "Sir, we're receiving damage reports from Imperial logistics networks," Park reported with satisfaction. Fuel depot at Rigel 7 destroyed. Communication relay in the Vegas system offline. Supply convoy to the Second Armada intercepted and eliminated. But Phase 3 was only the beginning. As Imperial forces scrambled to protect their supply lines, Phase 4 commenced. The revelation of humanity's true secret weapon. Admiral Chen appeared on screen again, her expression grimmer than before. Captain, initiate contact with our allies. Operation Unity begins now. Captain Vasquez felt a chill of anticipation. This was the phase of the war plan that even most human military personnel didn't know about. For 50 years, while the Empire had been expanding and conquering, human diplomats had been quietly making contact with species that the Empire had defeated, enslaved, or threatened. Not the member species who benefited from Imperial rule, but the conquered populations who dreamed of freedom. Sir, the communications officer reported, we're receiving acknowledgement signals from resistance networks in Imperial space. 15 species confirm readiness for coordinated uprising. The Empire was about to learn that their greatest strength, their vast multi-species territory, was also their greatest weakness. Every world they had conquered contained populations who remembered freedom and longed for liberation. Human agents have been carefully nurturing these resistance movements for decades, providing weapons, training, and coordination. All resistance cells are to begin simultaneous operations in 30 minutes, Vasquez announced. Target priorities are Imperial administrative centers, military installations, and communication networks. Lieutenant Commander Park looked up from his intelligence displays with something approaching awe. Captain, if this works, the Empire is going to face internal rebellions on over 300 worlds simultaneously, while their main fleets are committed to attacking us. It's going to work, Captain Vasquez said with quiet confidence. Humans have been planning this war since the day we first encountered the Empire. We've had 50 years to study their weaknesses, infiltrate their territory, and prepare for this moment. The first reports began arriving within hours. Imperial garrison forces on conquered worlds found themselves facing coordinated attacks from populations they had assumed were pacified. Weapons caches that human agents had been smuggling into Imperial territory for decades were suddenly activated. Resistance leaders who had been carefully hidden among civilian populations revealed themselves and began coordinating uprisings. Sir, Park reported, Imperial forces are requesting emergency reinforcements on over 100 worlds. Their garrison commanders are reporting that the rebellions appear to be professionally organized and well-equipped. Of course they are, Vasquez replied. Human military advisors have been training resistance fighters throughout Imperial space for 30 years. Every uprising is being led by individuals with extensive guerrilla warfare experience. Admiral Chen's final message arrived as reports of successful rebellions poured in from across Imperial space. Captain, Phase 5 is now active. Begin the offensive. This was the moment Captain Vasquez had been waiting for. While Imperial fleets were committed to attacking human space, while their supply lines were under assault, while rebellions raged across their territory, the hidden human fleets were about to launch coordinated strikes against Imperial core systems. All task forces report ready, announced the tactical officer. Stealth carriers have achieved positions throughout Imperial space. Fighter squadrons are prepared for Alpha strike operations. The Empire had planned to attack humanity with overwhelming force, but they had made a crucial miscalculation. They had assumed that humans would fight a defensive war, trying to protect their own territory from Imperial assault. Instead, humans had prepared to fight an offensive war, striking directly at Imperial core systems, while their fleets were committed elsewhere. Execute Operation Nemesis, Captain Vasquez ordered. Across the galaxy, human strike forces that had been hidden in the depths of space for months suddenly emerged to attack Imperial home systems. Fast carrier groups launched fighter swarms against orbital installations. Stealth destroyers eliminated orbital defense platforms. Marine assault forces landed on Imperial worlds that had never been threatened by external attack. Sir, the communications officer reported with barely contained excitement. We're receiving confirmation from strike teams throughout Imperial space. The orbital shipyards at Zephyr Prime are under attack. The Imperial Naval Academy on Altair 4 is surrounded. Marine forces have secured the government complex on Vegas 7. Captain Vasquez watched the tactical displays with professional satisfaction as humanity's true war plan finally revealed itself. The Empire had declared war expecting to face a primitive species fighting desperately to defend their small territory. Instead, they had awakened a military machine that had been preparing for this conflict for longer than most Imperial officers had been alive. "Captain," Admiral Chen said in her final transmission, "the Empire wanted a war. Let's give them one they'll never forget." As reports continued to arrive from across Imperial space, Captain Vasquez realized that the war everyone expected to see, Imperial forces crushing human resistance, had been replaced by something completely different. The Empire was about to discover that they weren't fighting a conquest war anymore. They were fighting a war for their own survival. And humanity was just getting started. Supreme Admiral Drakmor stood in the ruins of the Imperial War Council chamber, surrounded by debris from what had once been the most secure military installation in the galaxy. The ornate crystal walls were shattered, the holographic displays flickered with static, and half of the council seats lay empty, their occupants either dead, missing, or desperately trying to maintain control of their respective fleets scattered across Imperial space. "Status report," he demanded, though he dreaded the answer. Intelligence Director Kelnith, one of the few surviving council members, pulsed with dim, defeated light as she delivered the impossible news. "Supreme Admiral, the human offensive has achieved complete strategic surprise across all fronts. We have lost contact with over 60% of our territory. Rebellion has spread to 347 worlds. Our main battle fleets are trapped in human space by defensive networks far more sophisticated than anything our intelligence indicated." The old Zephyrian commander absorbed this information with the stoicism of a warrior who had seen too much war. In 70 years of military service, he had conquered dozens of species and expanded the Empire across half the known galaxy. Now, in what should have been his final campaign before retirement, he was witnessing the collapse of everything he had helped build. "The Second Armada?" he asked quietly. "Destroyed," Kelnith replied. "Admiral Vorthan's flagship was captured intact. The humans are broadcasting his surrender speech across Imperial communication networks. The Fourth Armada?" "Scattered." Admiral Kexmar attempted to retreat from human space, but found his supply lines completely severed. His forces are stranded in the Altair system with no fuel and minimal ammunition. "And the Ninth Armada?" Kelnith's crystalline form dimmed further. "Missing, Supreme Admiral. Their last communication was 12 hours ago. Human forces appear to have some kind of technology that can block our quantum communication networks." Drakmor moved to the shattered remains of the strategic display, where a few functioning projectors still showed the galaxy-wide tactical situation. What he saw there defied everything he thought he knew about warfare. The Empire's territory, which had been solid red for centuries, was now a patchwork of colors indicating human-controlled systems, rebellious worlds, and areas where Imperial authority had simply vanished. "How?" he asked, though he was beginning to understand the magnitude of the deception that had been perpetrated against the Empire. "The humans were never the primitive species we believed them to be," Kelnith explained. "Our intelligence networks were systematically compromised from the beginning. Every piece of information we gathered about human capabilities was carefully crafted to reinforce our misconceptions." She activated a working holographic display that showed the true scope of human military infrastructure. Not just the 47 star systems they officially controlled, but hundreds of hidden installations throughout the galaxy. Shipyards and rogue planets, supply depots and asteroid fields, military bases and systems that didn't appear on any Imperial star charts. "They built a second civilization," Drakmor breathed, "hidden in plain sight. Not just a second civilization, Supreme Admiral. They built a mirror image of our entire empire. For every Imperial installation, they created a human equivalent. For every Imperial fleet, they prepared countermeasures. They studied us for 50 years and planned for this war longer than most of our officers have been alive." The scope of the human deception was staggering. While the Empire had been confidently expanding and conquering, human agents have been infiltrating Imperial society at every level. Scientists studying Imperial technology, diplomats making secret contact with conquered species, military advisors training resistance movements, merchants establishing supply networks for the coming war. Sir, announced the few remaining communications officers, we're receiving a transmission from the human leadership. They're requesting a meeting to discuss terms. Drakmor almost laughed at the absurdity. 6 months ago, the Empire had demanded human surrender. Now, with Imperial fleets destroyed or scattered and rebellion consuming Imperial territory, the humans were offering to negotiate. Put it through, he ordered. The holographic display resolved into the image of an elderly human woman wearing simple civilian clothing. She sat behind a plain wooden desk in what appeared to be a government office, flanked by advisors who carried themselves with obvious military bearing. Supreme Admiral Drakmor, she said with calm formality, I am President Sarah Martinez of the Human Confederation. I believe we need to talk. President Martinez, Drakmor replied with what remained of his diplomatic training. It appears that congratulations are in order. Your species has achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. We've achieved survival, Admiral. That was always our only goal. At the cost of the largest empire in known space, Drakmor observed. President Martinez nodded slowly. The Empire chose to make this a war of extinction, Admiral. You demanded not just our submission, but our complete absorption into Imperial society. From our perspective, that represented the death of human civilization. So you chose to destroy us instead. We chose to free ourselves, President Martinez corrected. And in doing so, we freed every species your empire had enslaved over the past 3 centuries. It was true. The rebellions raging across imperial space weren't just human-instigated uprisings. They were genuine independence movements by species that had been conquered generations ago and had never forgotten their desire for freedom. The Empire had assumed that time and integration would eventually eliminate resistance. But instead, they had created a galaxy full of potential enemies waiting for the right moment to strike. What are your terms? Drakmor asked, knowing he had no choice but to listen. Complete withdrawal of all Imperial forces from human space and the territories of our allies, President Martinez said. Recognition of the independence of all worlds currently in rebellion against Imperial authority. Establishment of neutral zones to prevent future conflicts. And if we refuse, President Martinez gestured to someone off-screen, and the display shifted to show a tactical overview of the current military situation. Imperial territory was now divided into dozens of isolated pockets, each surrounded by hostile forces and cut off from central command. Admiral, your remaining fleets are scattered across 3 sectors with no unified command structure. Your supply lines have been completely severed. Your capital worlds are under siege by species you conquered decades ago. You no longer have the military capacity to refuse anything. Drakmor studied the tactical display and realized she was absolutely correct. The Empire's military had been designed to project power outward, conquering new territory and maintaining control through overwhelming force. It had never been designed to handle simultaneous rebellions across hundreds of worlds or coordinate defense against enemies who knew Imperial tactics better than the Empire knew them. How long have you been planning this? He asked. Since the day we first made contact with your Empire, President Martinez replied. We recognized immediately that our species would eventually come into conflict. Your Empire's expansion patterns made war inevitable, so we decided to prepare for it. 50 years of preparation for a 6-month war, Drakmor said with something approaching admiration. 50 years of preparation for 1 day of war, President Martinez corrected. Everything you've seen, every battle, every rebellion, every strategic surprise, was planned and coordinated as part of a single, comprehensive operation. We spent half a century positioning ourselves to win this war in a matter of hours. And the other species? The rebellions, were liberation movements that we helped organize and coordinate. Species that your empire had conquered and enslaved, waiting for someone to give them hope and opportunity. We provided both. Drakmor realized that the empire had fundamentally misunderstood not just human capabilities, but human nature. They had assumed that humans would fight like every other species they had conquered, defending their home territory until overwhelmed by superior force. Instead, humans had fought like humans, studying their enemy, preparing extensively, and striking with devastating effectiveness at the moment of maximum advantage. Admiral, President Martinez continued, the old empire is finished. The question now is whether the Zephyrian species wants to be part of the new galactic community we're building, or whether you prefer to continue fighting a war you've already lost. It wasn't really a choice. The Empire's military was broken, its territory in rebellion, its leadership scattered or dead. The humans had achieved in months what should have taken years of conventional warfare, the complete collapse of Imperial power. What happens to the Imperial species? Drakmor asked. The same thing that happens to every species in the new Confederation, President Martinez replied. You get to govern yourselves, develop your own culture, and live in peace with your neighbors. The only thing you can't do is conquer other species. And you trust us to honor such an agreement? President Martinez smiled then, and Drakmor caught a glimpse of the steel beneath her diplomatic manner. Admiral, we've spent 50 years studying your empire. We know your species better than you know yourselves. We know which ones can be trusted, which ones need supervision, and which ones represent ongoing threats. And the Zephyrians? Your species has a warrior tradition that we respect. You fight honorably, you treat prisoners decently, and you have a concept of professional military ethics. You'll be fine in the new Confederation, as long as you understand that the age of galactic empires is over. Supreme Admiral Drakmor looked around the shattered remains of the Imperial War Council chamber, then back at the human president who had just offered him terms that were far more generous than anything the Empire would have offered to a defeated enemy. I accept your terms, President Martinez, he said formally. The Empire surrenders. No, Admiral, President Martinez corrected gently. The Empire doesn't surrender. The Empire ends. What begins now is something new. A galaxy where species cooperate instead of conquering each other. As the communication ended and the formalities of surrender began, Drakmor reflected on the magnitude of what had just occurred. The humans had not merely won a war. They had fundamentally changed the nature of galactic civilization. They had taken an empire built on conquest and domination and replaced it with something unprecedented in known history. A confederation based on voluntary cooperation rather than forced submission. An old human soldier named Marcus Chun, sitting on his porch on the frontier world of New Aberdeen, turned off his radio after listening to the surrender broadcast. The war was over. The empire that had seemed so vast and threatening just months before had collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions and the carefully planned human response. He picked up his coffee cup, took a sip of the synthetic brew, and smiled as he watched the sunset over his wheat fields. The crops would be ready for harvest soon, and for the first time in decades, he could be certain that the peace would last. Somewhere in the distance, a new generation of children was playing in the fields, growing up in a galaxy where species worked together instead of fighting each other. The Empire had declared war, expecting easy victory over a primitive species. Instead, they had awakened something that would change the galaxy forever. Humanity had been ready for war. But, more importantly, humanity had been ready for peace.